1 minute notice.
Yeah, how I think that's a really great evidence of how committed and valuable these classes are. And I remain astonished that we have a full classroom of people
Right. And
every week.
we have two of our regulars here in the lab from University of Georgia or South Georgia. They're walking by right now. And so it's nice to have our audience in place.
Yes, it's wonderful. So today, Clacklipius, Brew, and continue to please let us know what you want to work on next. And you fantastic people, please take it away.
Jason, you want me to bring up the hitchensi echinarial fan or but just let me know when.
I will. I'm just gonna show the face first, perhaps.
Okay. Yep.
Just so we're all on the same page. I think people have caught on to this character in the 2010 and 2011 papers. I kind of wrote this character in a slightly different way because I think people didn't understand what I was talking about in 2010. But basically, there's this kind of squared off apex of the clypeus. So there's the clypeus has this kind of like thin edge, and sometimes you get these sort of like, I think Joel called them apical lateral denticles or something in his papers. But in other species like the versatum and admirandum that we covered last time, the clypeus kind of comes down. I think of it kind of like a trapezoid. It kind of comes down at an angle, and then there's the flat apex. But there's a distinctly kind of squared off aspect to the species that we're talking about today. And I think once you see it, it makes sense. It's hard to describe.
So
Has anyone? Yeah.
I was going to ask. So, can you talk a little bit about the width of that flat area of the edge versus the overall width of the clypeus? Is that a thing? Would it actually be a measurement too? Is that a wider spot, or is it simply the squared off nature of it?
Sorry, maybe it is. I don't think of it normally as a measurement. It's not something I normally measure other than with my eyes. But whenever I see this, clypeus, I guess because I never really worried about it too much.
Yeah.
I see it and I know exactly what it is. There might be other species. You mentioned Illinoensis, which has a really weirdly kind of squared off, wide kind of clypeal end. That one is so distinct in other ways that I don't usually think about it.
You don't need it. Yeah.
But it also has a really wide clypeus. But
would you always say that those teeth, those denticles or two teeth at the lateral sides are always there? Is that so I know people really struggle with this, in terms of getting it the first time, would those teeth very definitive?
They don't really protrude out, like they're not kind of coming out far. I don't think you can sort of see here. They just kind of, it just kind of come, it's kind of coming down from the angle, and then you just get this kind of vaguely rectangular shape with these sort of 90-degree angles.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a little bump you might see here. That's the labrum below. And, you have these sort of bristles that kind of emerge just before the apex. But yeah, it's just this kind of squared appearance.
Yeah. This is hitchensi, right?
What I'm showing actually should be weemsi.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you.
And in other respects, they seem very much like the kind of versatum admirandum type. The head is not unusually shaped. It's not too long. It's not too wide. The puncture density on the sputum is dense laterally, sparse medially. They're not coarsely sculptured, particularly. No unusual absence or presence of punctures. Not very hairy. but with some hairs.
Talk about T2.
T2. So yeah, so if usually I point people towards the kind of the apical impressed area of T2 to look for punctures there. In versatum and admirandum and the species we covered last week, they're very densely punctate across that whole surface. In this group, you might see some punctures, but they're not. It's not this is definitively absent where you're like, there's no punctures at all. But they're also not densely punctate. So they're kind of, there's a few punctures there, but nothing to write.
So that splits it pretty handily, because this is often a common group along with the evil trigeminum apex there, and not having as dense a pitting going all the way to the rim is a pretty good indicator that you should look at the Clypeus.
Yeah, and one thing about these ones is they're kind of a dull thing. So this scutum has quite a bit of microsculpture between the punctures. They're not smooth and shiny. And if you look at, we'll see T1 in a second, but when you look at the first tergum, there's a lot of that sort of fingerprint kind of impression of microsculpture that you don't see in a lot of you don't see in admirandum and a lot of those other species. Hair admirandum does kind of have something similar, but it doesn't. But it has a differently shaped Clypeus and some other things going on. But hair admirandum would be one you have to watch out for keying these out. But maybe now is a good time to show the fan.
Yep. So when you talk about that, there's tessellations on T1, a place that I look for weemsi and hitchensi is right around the fan area, which I tend to think of as weemsi as not having much in the way of any tessellations, and hitchensi having some. I don't know if you agree with that or not, because it's always been, as you will point out, a struggle sometimes to figure out whether I've got a weak hitchensi or a strong weemsi.
Yeah. I think it's in doubt. That's a weemsi. Yeah, if you want to show your hitchensi.
Okay.
I think I got a weemsi ready to go.
All right, there we go. So here's the thorax abdomen, and here's this fan. I'll change the focus a little bit so you can see that the fan is running all the way across, classically, in that one. And Jason, you have a weemsi on deck, right?
Yes.
See there, right?
This is hitchensi.
Yeah. So
how do you pronounce it?
Oh, I'm inconsistent. You could say hitchensi, hitchensi. Depends on whether or not you want to Latinize the English name. So, I'm not picky about those things. Yes. So that's kind of what you want to see. So if you see a nice, really completely enclosed fan, you can feel pretty confident you have hitchensi. So the name here is a little complicated because Mitchell described the species as Atlanticus. So if you look at the 1960 book, it's Atlanticus, and that's what it'll appear in and other sort of publications up to a point, although no one ever identified this. And then I decided that's a homonym with a European species, so I called it Mitchelli in my 2010 paper, but that actually, unbeknownst to me, was a synonym of an Australian species, and so that's why it's called hitchensi now. So it was a replacement name for a replacement. Okay. So yeah, hopefully that make the closed fan is clear. And other species like admirandum and paramandum are very open, so you don't have to worry about those. Let me try to share. So this is a weemsi, and it is a weemsi that has been DNA barcoded, and I'll get back to that. I don't know how well you guys can see. It's open. It's got a narrow opening. It's not a very wide opening. But there is a distinct space in the midline between the punctures. I don't think my camera has got good enough resolution to see what's going on with the surface sculpture.
Mhm.
Okay, I think we need to pause a second. I have several messages that are saying that they can't see any of the specimens. I'm
Oh.
also seeing people that can, so
Dean had the same problem.
Yeah, I
He
just
left
left
and
and
rejoined
rejoined
and
and
it
it
worked.
that is what I was gonna suggest. So I just want to make that announcement. Anybody who's having that problem, it appears that if you log out real quick, log back in, let's see if that works.
Yeah,
These are being recorded, so always check out the minutes you missed.
So, Jason, do you notice that right around the fan area that in weemsi is almost tessellation free? Because that's sort of my, an indicator, I'd say. It's hard because a lot of times it's goopy, a lot of times you can't see well, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, if I'm trying to divine whether I'm looking at a hitchensi or a weemsi, a lot of times I'm like, okay, what kind of tessellation is going on down? But I may be just making up stories.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I think there's maybe. I was looking. Ooh, I have made this unviewable again. And see the wing margin. So I have been. I was toying around with these before the class today, and I maybe gave myself the impression that maybe weemsi is a little bit less sculptured overall, but not in an easily described way. So like the surface sculpture in the mesoscutum is maybe it's completely sculptured, but it's maybe less sculptured, so it's but I think there's a lot of inconsistencies. I mean, I think there's maybe a little bit of impression that you can kind of see there, but I don't think the lighting on this scope is good enough for me to tell on this specimen. But that's a really narrow, and I think really narrow opening on T1. And there was a period between, when I left the York University, I was at Michigan State, and I didn't have access to all the, specimens for my dissertation. Some of these may have leaked into the hitchensi group because I was probably like, there's probably just a hair missing or a couple of hairs missing. But now I think actually probably these are all inside.
So do you?
Yeah.
So I was going to say, do you see habitat differences? I tend to see weemsi in more weirdly urban and suburban kind of places, and hitchensi, which is much more common down here, in less so. But a lot of times they both can co-occur.
Yeah, I'm less certain of that just because I'm probably I'm not as collecting them as much as you are directly. I'm usually I may be dealing with your specimens and they're, I have GPS coordinates, but I don't have, I'm not necessarily looking at the individual sites. That'll be interesting though. But they're both widespread. They're both all the way up to the east. They both get up into southern Ontario kind of area. We don't have them here in Manitoba, so we get a lot of eastern things, but we don't get hitchensi or weemsi as far as I know. So that gives you a sense of where they range. Yeah. The other thing I'm going to show something on my other computer. So they look very similar, and one could be forgiven to think that they're the same. I'll try to show share. So when I was doing my dissertation, and I barcoded a lot of specimens, trying to figure out what was going on here. I gotta figure out which computer. But there's a fairly definitive split. So here's some parasitic species up here, and then there's lots of hitchensi in a kind of a cluster, and a very similar to that cluster, they're very closely related, is weemsi, lots of weemsis. So they're kind of two distinct clusters. But if you let's see, where can I find one? Right here. That's a Leviensi. And Leviensi has the same kind of overall body shape, same clypeus, but it has a distinctly open fan. I have one here.
That range, like,
I think.
what's the range of that like?
Range for Leviensi.
Leviensi is much more southern, it seems.
Yeah. When I'm looking, I'm seeing specimens. It's you know, the lower half of the states of Mississippi, Alabama, and into Florida, Georgia, on coastal plain kinds of areas.
Yeah, so I you know, we have what I think is that, well, I can tell you exactly where I have it from, but so yeah, Mississippi, South Carolina, that's basically it. Into Texas, essentially. So again, that's not very good. But this is not the best view here, but again, you can kind of see it's
Oh, we're not seeing it.
once that settles. Oh, I have to share. See why I was wearing that. Okay. But yeah, it's a little out of focus maybe, but it is an open fan. But frustratingly,
Still not-
it seems to.
Still not seeing.
We now see your
Okay.
face.
Aha. Okay, I'm gonna try
So
again.
it should see a Levian. Is that what you got on deck?
Yeah. Okay. Now I
There we
see.
go. There we go. Okay.
Got it. We're good.
So yeah, it has an open fan. So right here, if you can't see it, well, there's no hairs. The only thing that really distinguishes it from a weemsi, as far as I can tell, really, is that it tends to have more yellow legs, tends to be paler. You know, the tegula are like a very yellow. It was kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
If you're in an area where they both occur, because you know, a lot of it's not unexpected in the south for bees to get a little more reddish, in a lot of cases, and so you don't almost have to barcode them all to try to figure out which one you got. I mean, it's one of those things where if it's got kind of yellow, a lot of yellow kind of on the tarsi leading onto the tibia, it's got an open fan, kind of pale yellow tegula, I'll say it's a Leviensi if I'm in like the Georgia, South Carolina, Florida area. And if it's darker, I'll say it's inside.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. And but different from, say, some of the other southern species that have really bright or strongly yellow legs, is it tends to be right at the, I would call it the joints. So at the tip of the tibia, and where it joins the femur and the end of the femur, and then the tarsal segments too. And it's really it's a little subtle. So it's on the orangish end of the spectrum. So it's like a dark orange, not really, I would say not really yellow, you know, or yellow orange at most.
Yeah, that's fair. So, see if I can actually get one in view here. My microscope camera is not showing anything. That's not good.
Are you using two screens?
No, it's just gone gray in a weird way. Let's try this again. Music, yeah, using. Oh. Okay, we got some action. Right. I'm going to. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen or try to. Okay. This should be a Leviensi.
Yep.
And the lighting is probably a little bit harsh. It's overexposed, but there's a lot of, yeah, the tarsi very orangey, and they're kind of extending onto the knees, kind of apex primarily. Which light is causing the problems? It looks
And
good
you
for a
can see
second.
up by the joint by the femur. That's one that I often look for because it's an odd pattern compared to light colored or orange colored markings on other specimens, but it's not, we're not talking fluorescent orange.
All right, my light just kicked the specimen. Having technical difficulties, everyone. I apologize.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
I'll rotate it a little bit and see if I can get a better light on it. I don't know why it's so. You had some way of getting the light better, but
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
yeah, I'm sorry it's overexposed, but the but yeah, that's basically the character you're looking for. And that's all there is to it, really. The one if you're down in if you're in an area where leviancy occurs, the other one you have to watch out for is that looks superficially similar is alichuensi. But it does not technically have the squared off clypeus, and it's got less kind of the little shorter press hairs, the tomentum on the metazoma, but it looks very similar. And it's actually more closely related to like the oblongum.
Doesn't it have more orange on the legs?
Yeah,
I think
strong.
It's a stronger coloration. It's like, that's something different.
And then actually, like barcode's the same as oblongum, so you can't tell those apart by barcodes.
Interesting.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't have any like magic. I'll keep looking, but I haven't yet found something where I'm like, oh, I just check this and be definitively sure that you've got memes on the maybe now I'll be encouraged to relook at all these specimens.
So I think that does that troika of tricky ones there. People may have questions. You mentioned para admirandum, which is so it looks actually really different. Like the vibe on it is so much different, but it's one that I think that falls between the cracks for a lot of people from what I've seen. So I don't know if you have that a specimen handy, but I could dig one out too. But since we have time,
I'll go see if I can grab one.
Claire, do we have questions?
Yeah, good time to get your questions in. We haven't really looked at the key specifically, so that might be a place for your questions looking for.
I've got a group for Jason and Joel next time though, which are the whole clade of Black Evelias. I think they're now Evelias. I always forget. Jason, another one that I would love to have a little review of, but I think is useful for other people too, is the is it Evelias now? I always forget the Berkmani and Foxy Eye and the what's the Macupenense group.
Yeah, those are now Hemihalictus. At least full time.
Oh, Hemihalictus. Okay.
I haven't checked these ones in advance, so I'm assuming they're correct.
What species again?
I think Paradmerandum.
Got it. Thank you.
Just gonna try to find a nice clean specimen for you people. Yeah, one thing that a nice admirandum tends to have is a nicer, more abundant tomentum on the tergum.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost solid on T, part of T2, but 3 and 4 seems like, and very white, bright. It's very bright colored.
This is what we're kind of talking about. I think everyone can see that. So the kind of on T2, you have these sort of, what I call the basal lateral tomentum. That's more kind of what like you'd see on T3 for hitchensi in those groups. They don't have that much hair. Or maybe I'll show one later, but this kind of solid, kind of consistent right across. The segment is fairly typical for parrot. It's also a fairly kind of dull bee. So it's got dull kind of microsculpture all over the place. It's got those kind of impressed markings on T1. And
This brings up something too, Jason, that you speak to on your keys fairly regularly and your descriptions, which is, and I may be getting even your terminology wrong, but the fimbriata on T3 a lot of times, or sometimes T2, and I have struggled with that one an awful lot, because am I just looking at hairs, or am I actually looking at a distinct band of morphologically separable hairs on the abdomen? That would be at the on the rim and be called a what do you call it, Jason?
I might have called it fimbriae. I don't know. If you're thinking about like an Oglochloropsis, you're gonna be getting you'll have the wrong impression.
Yeah, no.
So let me see. Trying to get this as focused as I can. So yeah, you have some longer hairs that are kind of direct, and sort of like little oppressed scale-like hairs, the tomentum. You can guys see what I would call the fimbriae here on T2, like right at the apex, just below the apex. There are some hairs that you'll sometimes see kind of laterally, and they're kind of mixed in on T3 here. But that's kind of what I'm looking at when I'm talking about that kind of apical fimbriae, whatever we call it. So there'll be some kind of like longer hairs that kind of mark the apical impress margin. So there'll be some hairs here. You can kind of see they're longer. And then there's this little oppress here. These little hairs here. That's what I'm kind of looking for.
Okay. Yeah, sometimes I just have a difficult time defining that as a band. When we're dealing with things like Melisodes and Halictus and those where you got very strong, like that is a band. And then in the Dialictus group, it gets vague in my book. And so I largely ignore it when you say anything. I mean, not anything. But when you talk about those bands, like, because I can't, I feel like I can't define that definitively.
Right. So I mean, I guess what I'm kind of thinking of, like if you look here on T2, there are these little hairs that kind of just overlap the margin, and you
Mhm.
presumably you can see them here where my mouse is, and then they're absent immediately, right?
Yeah.
And so there'll be some species where even if you look laterally, you don't really see them. So that's kind of whenever that character comes up, that's the deal. But if I have to get to that, they're probably hard to identify.
Yeah.
Better.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I don't know if this is going to show up or if I can find the character, if the leg's going to be in the way. I'm going to try. But Paradmirandum also generally has a kind of an unusual episternum sculpturing. But I'm not sure I'll be able to show it to you. Because the lighting has to be just so.
Yeah, the main thing I look at is that, very hairy on the rear part of the abdomen, and T1 very tessellate. It's hard to see in these screenshots, but really, strongly inscribed with those microscopic lines, unlike, the things we've just were looking at, or Admirandum, which those are almost all mirror-like.
Yeah, you're not going to really be able to tell, but like usually if you look at a Paradmirandum, it's just kind of it's dull on the mesopisternum, and you'll see these little shallow punctures that are visible. But you have to have nice diffuse light, and you have to be illuminating the area. If you looked at like a hitchensi or something like that, it would be a little bit more irregular. You'd have a little bit of like a regular kind of rugae kind of mixed up. You wouldn't see this. It's not quite to the point where you would say, oh, that's punctate.
Right.
Because there's all this microsculpture that kind of makes the punctures less obvious, but they're there.
I
So
think
that's kind
of
of easy.
Gotham as having that too.
Yeah, it's a little. It's a different. It's maybe Gotham's a little shinier. But yeah, Paramount is just like dull little kind of vaguely kind of whitish golden haired bee. Very nice. One thing that kind of confused me early on was that it might have distinct casts. So there was some material from like the summer that was like, very small compared to some of the other specimens, to the point that I thought maybe there was a different species. And I was calling it Paradmirandum for a while. But then we barcoded them, and they're the same. So you might get some pretty sharp contrast in size, but they look the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I don't know about, I tend to think of all of these as kind of open area kind of species, not your forest associated.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
But for that reason, often you get them a lot of bark bulbs.
We have a question in the chat by Sean.
Yep. Sure.
For the unique characteristics that are circled in green, which are on the Leviant's identification summary, which says small southern coastal plain in distribution, hind tarsi and base tarsi lemon yellow, large brown spot in middle, pitting quite fine on scutum, very few abpressed hairs on the abdomen. Wondering if this should be updated to include squared off clipius, going back to updating, and then asked earlier, updating the Wikipedia and iNaturalist pages, would it be acceptable to add these summaries to species pages for folks reading about those? So on these other external moments.
I'm not sure I caught all of that. Where was the source of the where was the information that you were finding all these things from? Sorry. Summary of the Was that
Is
for the
that on
key?
Jason's key diagnosis, or was that a Discover Life or a cheat sheet thing?
That was a picture from Discover Life. So I think that was more of a question for us, but confirming if we should do that. Because I think those identification summaries might be grabbed from like the last sentence of a species description or something like that,
It's all over the place.
depending on what species. But Sean is on here to ask the question. So let's just let him do that.
Yeah, so it's when we're going through the presentations of each species, there's sometimes very key characteristics that are highlighted to pull out that species from other ones. And it looks like on the Discover Life page, there is a summary of those unique characteristics. And I just want to make sure I was understanding the squared off clipius as part of the Leviensis.
Yeah, so I'll talk about the Discover Life, and which is basically that's something that we wrote that we thought was helpful when defining the species, and most of those are pretty old now. So yes, I think we can interject into that the squared off clipius, and I don't know if that's just a character of the species, or is that explicitly in your key, Jason? The squared off clipius, or does it just happen like Illinoisense has a squared off one, but you don't need it for the key, so it's not really mentioned.
Yeah, I mean that's how you would separate these in the key. This is based on the clipius.
Okay.
I'm not sure off the top of my head which probably the hair fan first will get hitchensi on its own. And then yeah, Leviensi and but then it would, so that character for the squared off clipius probably appears twice, depending on which direction you go on the hair fan. I'm trying to, just for the sake of completeness, put a para-admirandum face on, but it's not working out for me very well. This one's got its mouth parts open, so it's harder to see the characters of interest. This is a para-admirandum face. And the apex kind of comes down along this kind of angled margin. And you don't get this impression of a squared off. It's hard to see on the specimen, I could say. But yeah, what I'm kind of looking for is, this, angle kind of coming down from the margin base of the mandible, kind of converging, and then it's kind of running into the end of the clipius, and then it kind of stops and it kind of goes across the sun, stands back the other way.
Right, and no sort of obvious tooth-like tentacle-like things on the rim defining the
So yeah,
corners.
so the rim is like right here. So it's not complete. It may not be completely smooth. Like it might kind of come out and then be projecting a little bit, but it's not this squared off apex. And this is basically what most Dialictus kind of look like. I don't know how to get rid of this anymore. I don't know how to these.
Address the second half of the question about Wikipedia and INAT. Sean, do you want to speak to what you're trying to do there, or do you have a student group doing that?
Yeah, so I'm working with a group of naturalists out here in Texas, and they're trying to learn the bees that are out here. So when we're coming up across species that are really easily identifiable, like Anthophora californica, we simply just have on there, like, you're looking for a typical Anthophora with white bands on the scutellum that are colored instead of the white hairs versus Urbana. So we're creating this like internal list, but if Discover Life's descriptions already have these kind of shortcuts or like unique characteristics, if Discover Life is okay with us adding those to the iNaturalist or the Wikipedia page, because those are the two that are connected, I can try and do that. But if you want to keep it only on Discover Life, then we can just say, see the Discover Life page for more.
Well, From the, what I would say is from the Discover Life point of view, use away, but it's a buyer beware kind of thing. So what would be probably a good so you could put it up initially, but you might also take those ID shortcuts or those identification notes that are often on there and pass it. You could pass it by me, but like Lasioglossums, you could pass by Jason and he'd be like, oh, we need to add the squared off Clypeus or something to make it more complete. I think those shortcuts are really valuable, particularly for someone who is following more in line with a picture book kind of approach. Like I don't have a microscope, or I'm just starting and I have a microscope, but I'm scared by keys and, being like this, but having that is actually, I think, really, really nice to have, and adding it in to iNaturalist, I think would be a plus. But I think having also then having them sending them out as you compile them to people like myself and other people for review, I think would be useful, just because we keep adding things to that and some of these may be out of date.
I'm also wondering,
Yeah.
Sam, so most, as a part of the welcome packet, I've sent out your Lasioglossum cheat sheet.
Uh-huh.
So that, I know that you are very happy to share all of your words. So maybe that's a place to,
I will give people all my money. Oh, sorry, I'm oversharing.
maybe that's a place to also, it's mostly Eastern focused, but that might be a place to fish for.
Yeah, that's
this kind of
another spot.
information.
A long time ago, Jason looked at that, but I don't know if you even remember that. But
Probably not.
yeah,
The,
so I think reviews all this is probably good, but sending it out for more reviews is going to be useful to everybody, because like right now I'm updating the character for Leviency online.
Yeah.
As per you guys.
Yeah, I just opened up the Discover Life page for hitchensi. Yeah, there's sort of two things there. So there's like, I assume Sam has written at the very top, and then there's like the diagnoses from the published papers, which are also on those pages, which I think have just been taken verbatim from paper.
Yeah.
With a citation. So that would be my only, like, if you want to use any of the information that's below the thing that says retrieved from Gibbs J, right? The copyright for that belongs to Magnolia Press.
Yeah.
And so I think you just want to, if you use that, you know, cite it.
Yeah,
The way to
I just
think
wanted to make
about
sure.
it is,
Oh, sorry.
I was gonna.
And anything you do with that, anything you do in terms of like copying information from my papers, got nothing to do with me. So, so I would just cite it.
Yeah, you can cite them as basically as a quote in lots of ways. You're not taking the whole paper and republishing it and putting your name on it. But when you grab someone else's information, I think, again, when you're talking about just small sections, then it becomes a quote, and sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval is just to say, hey, we grabbed this from here. And you're probably going to be fine all the time on that.
Yeah, and as far as I know, Magnolia Press is not like, it's not a big major publisher that's looking to sue anybody.
You're out there looking. Oh my God, you stole our quote. Now we're suing you for $1 million.
Yeah, so probably safe, but
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. As we're working through those things, I'll try and update those pages.
Yeah, and
I mean,
I really
one of those
encourage that.
Yeah, for sure. Like for Wikipedia and stuff like that, great. For iNaturalist, I mean, I think it's the odds of identifying one of these on iNaturalist is like it's very thin. It'd be very hard. You have to have some really great photography and all the right angles to be super positive that getting this right.
Yeah.
There is
the whole.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that there is. You just have to. The Clypeus character is going to be also really useful because, other than for hitchensi, It looks very much like Viridanium group, except it's got a really nice fan. All the Viridanium group things have open fans, essentially. But there are a few kind of uncommon species in the Viridanium group, like Catheriniae, which has a closed fan, but it doesn't have that Clypeus character. So it's a good one to learn and get comfortable with. Because the hair fan alone is not going to see it.
Yeah, I've got it in my notes to make sure when people are taking photos to add that and the front tibial area too with the ones we talked about last class.
Yeah.
But thank you guys. I got to run to a different meeting, but I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Well, thanks for joining.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Sam, I asked if you periodically update your cheat sheet, such as, we're mostly circulating one from probably 2019-ish.
I know I add my own personal notes to that,
Mhm.
but wondering if you had.
I haven't updated that in years, so the answer is no. But, it's another thing. We could send it out. You could send it out to the bee monitoring list and to Jason and Joel, of course. But what I found is on these ID things, people they don't get into keys and IDs and like minutia very much. There's not many people who respond, but I think it would be nice if we had more people who were drilling into that. But I don't know. It's just how it is. There's few people who just like writing keys and reviewing keys. I don't know what you find, Jason, but that's sort of my impression. Hard to get people to look at closely at a bunch of characters.
I was once reviewing a taxonomic paper, and I sent back some feedback about, I don't think this couplet works well. And the editor was so shocked that I ran things through the key. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so yeah,
I
unfortunately, my own
remember-
keys weren't tested that well. So
Yeah, I don't know if Mike's on the line, but Mike Arduzer, he's been putting together some really nice keys for the tall grass prairie area. And he would send them out to people and I'd be like, oh, this is cool. And I would send him back comments. And after doing that for a while, he said, Sam, you're the only person who ever comments on them. So, and he's sending them out to the experts. So that never made me very sanguine about people really getting feedback. But yes, we do want it. So if anyone has any complaints or finds it difficult or wording, let us know. We're into it.
yeah, definitely for for the zoo taxa papers, I usually have tracked kind of versions of those where there's name changes or errors. I kind of just try to put those on. So if I'm sharing that paper,
Yeah,
I have a version that's better than the published one. Yeah, I've mentioned this before, I think, of these things, but like we do have this Protandrina pterosaurus thesis that's publicly available, and very happy to have feedback on the keys for that, because that's not published yet officially. So
yeah.
just
I've
don't
got
lose the names.
I've got a slug of them to from Tennessee to trial out. So we'll see how it works.
Any other questions?
Great. Well, do we have any more questions about?
This group, or requests for what group you want to work on next week. Sam said something about, what did you say, the Hemialicus?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
cool with that? We're good with doing your request. You can always email me.
Well, thank you so much, Jason and Joel. This is a great contribution. Everything, as you know, is online, so people can come back and revisit these kinds of things. And thank you, Claire, for making it happen.
Fantastic. And as we're asking for people's support, we have transcripts that are mediocre at best. So if there are people who want, as they're running through keys and stuff, want to help with those exist.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah,
All right. See you next week, y'all. Thank you so much, Jason.
thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.